Welcome back to 7th Grade Mustache. On today's episode, we'll be speaking about the shadow biome. There was a research paper published in 2009 by researcher P.C. Davies titled Signatures of a Shadow Biosphere. It was published in the journal Astrobiology. The paper discussed the potential for Earth to host a shadow biosphere, or shadow biome, involving forms of weird life, whose biochemistry is so non-standard that it would not be detected by life detection tools targeted at standard traditional biochemistry. This kind of idea is sometimes been known as the paraphysical hypothesis, which describes forms of life that are physical, that are usually undetected and unknown to modern sensibilities. Davies and his colleagues were referring to life on a molecular level, but there are recent events that hint at the micro reflected in the macro. Consider the strange airborne jellyfish UFO that was spotted slowly flying over a military base at the U.S. Al-Taqadum Air Base in Iraq over the course of several months in 2017. It was not visible to the eye, but became visible with thermal imaging cameras that surround the base. Radar operators began telling the ghost story around the base. Eventually, the footage was released after the December 2017 New York Times Tic Tac story unofficially ushered in the UFO disclosure that many people have been waiting on. So, people often talk about UFOs and they think that they are piloted by aliens. There are people that suggest some of these UFOs are piloted by creatures from Earth. This is what is referred to as the Cryptoterrestrial hypothesis. It suggests that non-human intelligences may be responsible for UFOs and may already be present in Earth's environment in some case, as opposed to having an extraterrestrial explanation. However, rather than existing in other dimensions, they are present in a relatively more conventional sense, but nevertheless hidden in some way. They may be living underground or underwater. Recent observations suggest it may have some validity. It could also help to assign some probability to ground this research. Serious researchers such as Jacques Vallée and Hal Puthoff believe the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis should be actively investigated, rather than passively and reactively waiting for relevant data to make itself apparent. UFOs are not only aerial in their travel, but also underwater or transmedium in the many sightings of USOs, or unidentified submersible objects. The importance and indeed urgency of paying attention to such phenomenon has been outlined in a white paper written by retired Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet. His white paper argues that an extensive body of accounts and data show that USOs, unidentified submersible objects, act in ways that surpass human technology and even challenge scientific understanding of what is possible underwater. They are said to move at incredible speeds and are capable of sudden and rapid acceleration, deceleration, and direction changes, all without any visible means of propulsion or control. Former Russian Navy officer, now UAP/UFO researcher Vladimir Ozhazha, is quoted as saying 50% of UFO encounters are connected with the oceans, 15 more with lakes. So UFOs tend to appear around large bodies of water. To that point, USOs seem to be of increasing concern to relevant authorities. For example, in May of 2024, House Representative Anna Paulina Luna, co-chair of the Congressional UAP Caucus, was asked by reporter Matt Laszlo whether she had any updates on a planned UAP hearing in the House of Representatives. She replied, "We're working on doing something with the USOs. The proposed UAP Disclosure Act of 2023 would have required authorities to release information regarding damaged or intact ocean surface and undersea craft associated with unidentified anomalous phenomena. Thus, there is an increasing recognition of an underwater dimension to the phenomenon." Another area of concern is appearing to enter and exit potential underground access points like volcanoes. The Popocatépetl volcano in central Mexico, for example, is considered a hotspot for such observations. One theory is the volcano functions as an interdimensional portal, something that allows them to move between two locations in space and time. However, other people speculate that the UFO might not only be drawn to such locations, but might come from underground. It's a possibility that these non-human intelligences responsible are living in a subterranean area. There are rumors of underwater bases in areas notable for UFO UAP reports. It has them entering and exiting the water, making strange movements, forms, and shapes. You have to encapsulate this in something to understand this in a certain way because it challenges the way you view history and reality. And people often talk about this firmament. Nobody was really talking about the firmament before. But ever since these Cheeto Finger 4chan motherfuckers just trolled everybody and started talking about flat earth as a joke, and everybody picked it up, they began talking about the flat earth, this Van Allen belt that surrounds the earth. The reason this gives people pause, makes people think about this, is because if you think of UFOs coming from not outer space but from other dimensions, think of space itself as something that's empty and not traversed by living things, but it's the planets are the portals to other planets. And so these ships then traverse space and time through other planets to get to other planets, appearing in the atmosphere of these other planets or through these other planets. It makes me think of this concept of we're not trapped in here with them. They're trapped in here with us. So that's something that has been really rolling around in my mind and having me give a really deep thought about space travel in a different way. The notion of cryptoterrestrials has a long history. For a start, it has often been imagined that mysteries may be concealed within the earth, such as deep caverns and huge cavities inside the earth. The lost Tibetan city of Shangri-La comes to mind. In ancient times, the idea of subterranean realms exist and become intertwined with the concept of places such as the Egyptian underworld, Greek Hades, the Nordic Svartalheim, Christian hell, and the Jewish Sheol, which talks about the inner earth in its Kabbalistic literature, such as the Zohar and the Hesed el-Avraham. In Hindu and Celtic legend, which some believe shared an ancient connection through a lost antediluvian city, there are caves and underground entrances to subterrestrial worlds. Some have connected the Hindu land of Aryavarta, or the abode of the excellent ones, a land ruled by a supernal race thousands of years before the Great War laid out on the Mahabharata. Many people believe this ancient race to be the same lineage as the ancient civilizations from Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu that were wiped out by war and cataclysmic events, driving them underground to Agartha. There is another underworld in the Hindu Mahabharata known as Patala that others point to. It shares many similarities with depictions of a subterranean world, though it is said they are at war with the Agarthans. Patala is the seventh layer of the underworld in Hindu scriptures and is ruled by the Nagas, a half-human, half-reptilian species who are depicted with jeweled hoods that light their realm. The Naga are a highly advanced race with cutting-edge technology. Occasionally they are said to abduct, torture, and kill humans, though other accounts refer to them as having a positive impact on earthly events. So here you have this Cobra-La situation going on, and it's happening in the hollow earth. So you have the hollow earth, you have cryptoterrestrials. Already this is some crazy shit. But the problem is that the way we see this reality and the way it's been spoon-fed to us by people who know a little bit but not enough themselves to tell you what's going on. In 1692, Edmund Halley, the English scientist who studied the comet that bears his name, may have been the first to develop a scientific hypothesis about the hollow earth. He composed the theory as a way of explaining anomalous compass readings. Halley's theory was that the planet is a series of nested spherical shells spinning in different directions, all around a central core. In his estimation, based on the readings of the magnetic field and what he knew of the gravitational pull of the sun and the moon on the Earth, this model could account for any inaccuracies in his readings of the magnetic fields of the planet. He also posited that the space between each shell may have had luminous atmospheres capable of supporting life. So then these luminous atmospheres, luminous meaning light, meaning there's some type of reflected light or plasma source that's providing light and warmth inside the Earth. There are people who have claimed to have gone deep into the Earth and have seen these second suns, as they refer to them. In 1818, John Cleves Symes Jr. published his circular number 1, declaring to the world that the Earth is hollow. Symes, a veteran of the War of 1812 and an unsuccessful trader, soon became the most famous and successful proponent of the hollow Earth history. His initial vision of the Earth's interior was like a simplified version of Halley's multi-layered model, with the exception that Symes' version included huge holes at the north and south poles, which allowed access to the hidden world inside. These holes, his unique addition to the hollow Earth theory, would even come to be known as Symes holes. Symes believed that his theory was not science fiction but science fact, and that it applied only to the Earth, not only to the Earth but to all planetary bodies. To him, the whole universe was hollow. So, in a way, that kind of goes back to what I was saying about how these craft traverse space and time through the planets and not outside the planets.
Look, you said a bunch of stuff. First, go back to the flat earther firmament thing. I think those are two separate things. Like you said, that flat earther thing came out as a joke, and then people just ran with it. Even the ones that created it, like, dude, we weren't serious. We were referring to something else. But the firmament, I've seen too many examples, whether there's a dome around the Earth, whether it's the whole thing that keeps life together, or even when they talk about under the oceans, there are other oceans under the ocean where two bodies of water stop and they don't mix. We've seen that over and over. Now, let's talk about the UFO that I saw. This is something that me and you talked about on a personal level. I had sent you a video, and I'm like, we both said the same thing. I said, as fast as this thing was going, it's no way it stopped when it hit the ground. It had to pass through the ground. So the idea that
You got to give them context so they understand what you're talking about, because we talk about seeing all kinds of UFOs, but which particular event are you talking about? They have to have the context.
Yeah. You laid out a bunch of stuff, so that's why I was trying to keep up. But about 2 years ago, I was coming back from Des Moines, and I saw something.
This is in broad daylight.
Yeah, I filmed it. I saw something before that was kind of a clear bubble, close to what Billy, what's his name, was talking about, that he saw when he was a kid in Florida. I seen something similar. And Roscoe said, hey, why don't you contact MUFON? So there's a MUFON in every state. And I contacted him, and this guy was kind of, he wasn't shitty, but he's like, hey, if you ain't got no footage, it don't matter, kind of thing. So I said, the next time I see something, I am going to film it no matter what. So I filmed something. I get a still picture, and I get a video of it. And I send the video and the still picture to Roscoe, and he's like, holy shit. And so I saw a UFO come from the right side. It's coming from, I'm driving, Nebraska is west of Iowa, so I'm driving west, and this is coming from north to south. And when I see it, I'm a passenger in a car, and I'm seeing this, I'm like, dude, this thing is still going. I'm going to get a picture. So I snap a still, and then I film it. It's only like maybe 4 seconds, 7 seconds, and it goes from right to left. Then all of a sudden it drops straight down, and you see the traffic moving. So you can see, and this thing is almost like whenever you see these UFOs that kind of like are changing shape and they're like spinning and they got sharp edges at the same time. That's what I saw. And it's like almost like a twinkling thing, and it goes straight down. And when it shoots down, it's shooting down at a very great speed. And one of the things that, like I said, that me and Roscoe discussed off the air was that there's no way that thing stopped. I mean, it could have. Like when we was a kid, there was a show called Automan where he would just stop. In fact, if you ever watched that show, he had a sidekick named Cursor. That's what this ship looked like. This whatever it was. I don't want to call it a ship. Whatever this flying thing was kind of reminds you of Cursor. It's like changing shape constantly, but it shoots down. And I'm like, no, oh, hell no. It did like a 90-degree angle, shoot straight down. And we had discussed this. I'm like, do you think that thing stopped just right before it hit the ground, or do you think it passed through the ground? And that's one of the things we talked about. that thing had to keep going. There was no way for that thing to stop, or that wasn't its intent. And when I say it hit the ground, I think it passed through the ground. So this idea of multidimensional or other things living in different layers of reality within our Earth, that makes perfect sense. Even when you talk about what you call the submersible objects, they even talk about like this. No, we don't have vehicles that can just pass from air to water. We got like a couple that can pop up, maybe take off. Like we got seaplanes, but the idea of something going 300 miles an hour in the air, then go 300 miles per hour under the water, yeah, that's crazy. That's one of the things they talked about, how they think that these vehicles are in some kind of warp, or they have some kind of thing that goes around them that propels them through a different means other than what that conventional means that we're familiar with. I think that sometimes we try to put human limitations on things that aren't human. You know, like you don't put the same limitations on a dog that you put on a man. So the idea of putting limitations on these beings who may have a very long history and have had the ability to, you know, they don't have the things that are in our ways that stop us from using all the technology available. You always hear about places like Pikes Peak, UFOs. You hear about Mount McKinley, all these great mountains. You hear about whether it's a whole city underneath, or you see a bunch of UFOs around it. And like I said, if these UFOs are passing through, you know, solid matter and going into another reality or whatever they're doing, then yeah, that's why you can't find them all the time. That's why they're not always there. But like I said, like my brother was telling you, the idea of seeing that jellyfish UFO, it might just be existing in another reality and you don't see it all, or you just see like the remnants of it, or you see like the exhaust is what you're seeing, or, you know, that kind of thing, like the shadow. You're not seeing the actual of whatever it is. But like, back to what I'm saying, the idea of other things existing and having a long history, and, you know, the worst one I saw was that one down in Vegas. Well, article I read, was the one down in Vegas where they were drilling, and the guy said, yeah, these guys are drilling. They had a whole military thing going on, and then they encountered these other beings when they went through this wall. It was an explosion. They were fighting back and forth. It was a real battle. He said, I only saw one of two of them get killed. So yeah, the whole idea that there's other realities or even other areas. And oh yeah, let's not forget, they found that whole underground thing in China, where it's like 2 miles down is a whole community underground, not people of course, but it's animals. It's a whole ecosystem underground, and the largest cave in the world. And they got full-fledged. They got animals. They have plants. Now, here's the crazy part. They have light some kind of way, and they really figured out the whole light situation because these plants are growing. They got photosynthesis going on. And so, yeah, the idea that there's underground suns or anything like that, that's not far-fetched. How about this? When white folks first got to the Congo, remember how many times did they say they saw dinosaurs? The dinosaurs are still living in the Congo. So the idea of a pocket society or something living, and they have different. Well, what Roscoe was saying is that they literally don't have the same kind of bioengineering that we have. So what if they don't breathe oxygen? What if they breathe something else? So we wouldn't even be able to detect them through our means. So yeah, this is some profound stuff you were talking about. It's just so many layers.
Symes never wrote a book about his ideas, but there are several different authors who published works discussing his ideas. There was one that was published in 1826 called The Theory of Concentric Spheres, and they did quote him in that one. There was another one that had an article that appeared in a separate booklet in 1827, and it was called The Remarks of Symes' Theory, which appeared in the American Quarterly Review. In 1868, Professor W.F. Lyons published The Hollow Globe, which put forth John Symes' hollow earth type theory, but didn't mention Symes. Symes' son, Americus Symes, then published the Symes theory of concentric spheres to set the record straight.
What about the circle within the circle? The whole thing with the it was Farrakhan talking about, but Japan, And some of they were trying to say that the people in Japan were alien hybrids,
Well,
and
but there's also the Japanese Atlantis, which is called
yes,
Yanaguni. And that's said to be at
that's
least a
real.
minimum of 10,000 years. That's actually something that they have found at the
Yeah,
bottom of the ocean.
underwater. Yeah, well, but don't forget they try to dismiss it and say that it was done by the currents. Remember, don't forget that.
Right, but
They
the currents makes complex structures and steps and all that. Okay, that's
90
bullshit.
degree angle there. Yeah, you.
That's
It's
gaslighting.
very,
That's what that is.
well, it's very hard to find 90-degree angles in nature, and these things have nothing but 90-degree angles.
In 1864, Jules Verne published A Journey to the Center of the Earth, which proposed a weird world inside of our own. While it was not the first work of fiction to propose such a thing, Dante's Inferno was very similar to that, where it talked about a world inside the world, or a circle within a circle, as Duct Tape just described. Jules Verne's work quickly became the benchmark for many fantasy tales, giving steam to a whole subgenre of subterranean science fiction. Many of these stories use the stories of Ed Haley and John Symes as jumping off points for tales of weird prehistoric jungles and highly advanced lost races of humans. In the 1892 novel, The Goddess of Advadabar, or The History of the Discovery of the Interior World, used John Symes' model as a basis for a tale of a rich interior world inhabited by a race of spiritually enlightened beings. In 1886, Cyrus Teed established the Assembly of the Covenant, or the Church Triumphant, in the World College of Life, a school of metaphysics mostly with members of the mental science group. It was associated with the Society Arch Triumphant. He became convinced that it is mathematically impossible to discern whether we are inside or outside of a sphere. So we could live inside a hollow universe. In the center would be the sun, and the planets and stars only appearing bright to us because they reflect sunlight on the surface of the concave earth. This land was called Koresh, which is the Hebrew translation of his own name, Cyrus. A small cult developed around him called the Koreshan Unity, after Teed renamed himself Koresh. Let's stop for a second. The last time you heard of a cult led by a guy named Koresh, I haven't looked that far into the Branch Davidians, but I wonder if he had some of the same belief systems as this Cyrus Teed guy, and how hard they went against those people with the might of the U.S. government to destroy them.
That's a whole other conversation. But don't forget that.
Or is it the same conversation?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say is how many times have you run into somebody with the name Crowley and they're always related to Aleister Crowley?
Or they're mostly a piece of shit.
Piece of shit human being. Again, we haven't sat down and figured out if they're related to this guy or not. But I think it's a weird coincidence that there's a movement behind somebody with the name Koresh. That's all I'm saying.
The Koreshans established an extensive colony in Estero, Florida in 1894. That's a cult. But most of the community disbanded after Cyrus Teed's death in 1908. The church remained active in defending these ideas until 1982. So keep in mind, from the time of the founding of that church until he died in 1908, and maybe 10 years after that, up until the end of the First World War, spiritualism was really a big deal for about 60 years in the United States and Europe. You had all these people who were interested in spirituality and astral plane, talking to the dead, and supernatural meta powers, all these things. And then they had a great reset with World War I, and everybody stopped talking about this stuff, or it went underground. It existed a little while until the time around when Harry Houdini died, because you still had all these magicians traveling around and making money off of these people who were interested in the spiritual realm. In his book that was published in 1906, The Phantom of the Poles, William Reed presents a collection of reports of polar explorers on strange and unexplained phenomena, such as warm winds, deposits of dust, and rocks embedded in icebergs. There were also large ice-free areas, freshwater areas in the open polar ocean, and bizarre auroras. All of this in support of his belief that the polar areas or the vestibule, to the interior of the hollow earth. Marshall Gardner wrote the book A Journey to the Earth's Interior in 1913. There was an expanded edition that was published in 1920. He placed an interior sun in the hollow earth. He even built a working model of the hollow earth and patented it. Gardner made no mention of Reed, but did take John Symes to task for his idea. In the same time, Vladimir Obruchev wrote a fiction novel called Plutonia, where the hollow earth's interior possessed one inner central sun and was inhabited by a prehistoric species. The interior was connected with the surface by a hole in the Arctic.
We've heard that before, haven't we?
Yep.
Admiral Byrd.
Yep. There is an article printed in the Russian newspaper Pravda, and this article was published November the 18th, 2003. For several years, the scientists preserved the secret of the shocking data of interpretation of photographs of our planet from space. In the ice of the North Pole, there is a huge hole could be clearly seen. Soon a similar hole was discovered in Venus. Astronomers were shocked and questioned if these planets are hollow inside and what they have in their cores. Full stop. Nobody is talking about the pentagon shape that is at the top of Saturn.
Okay, so this goes back to what you were saying about a lot of these Jewish are Saturn worshipers, and that's where the Star of David comes from, and all this other stuff. And well, how do they know about it? There are
because fallen angels have told them about it.
Yes, there's reasons for it. Oh yeah, it gets deep, and because of that, also this one dude broke it down. He said the Star of David is not talked about favorably in the Bible. These people hijacked it and they ran with it, and now we associate it with these converts. And then this also goes back to Gentile sacrifices, eating Gentile children, all that kind of stuff. And they said it all goes back to Saturn worship. And yeah, it's a crazy history regarding this. So, oof, not going down that road right now. That's a rabbit hole. It's going to take a while.
But it's strange when you hear about these holes at the North Pole and the South Pole, and then you see these similar holes on Mars, and you see them on other planets. I'm like, there is a connection here as to what happens and how there's probably stuff on the inside the cores of these planets.
Well, when you said that these other planets are portals also, and every planet is a portal, that's where the shit starts to get, okay, wow. Starts getting deep. But hold it, we've heard about people talk about there's a portal to Mars, that they've sent people to Mars before. There's a portal on Earth to get to Mars, and we've heard that before. We've heard some kind of Space Force go there. In fact, even if you ever watched, God damn it, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., remember that was like the theme of the second season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where they were going to a portal on Earth that got them to another planet.
Yeah, see, they started getting into that stuff, and then the show gets canceled, right? Like it went 2 seasons.
I think they had two and a half. It was weird, but it's just the fact that sometimes when fiction gets too close to reality,
shut it down.
They shut it down. Yes, period. They shut it the hell down because, see, here's the thing.
They Live had so much in it.
Hold it.
When Roddy Piper and the black dude go underground, and they go to that base where they're having this meeting, and it's like this stockholder meeting, this Berkshire Hathaway type of meeting underground, and they got the armed guards controlling everything, and then that guy who was the traitor, the human traitor, the familiar, gave them the tour and showed them the jump room, the transporter room, that when the guy was standing at the platform and his viewpoint was the planet that he was jumping to.
Yep. And
then he asked him, how's it work? And he's like, well, it's something to do with bending light. And I'm like, oh yeah, teleportation.
Well, no. Remember the guy was he had a used salesman feel to him. You know what I'm saying? He had that kind of slimy, grimy feel to him. But it lets you know that our people would sell us out. Even, again, it's a movie.
But in slavery that happened. in
Yeah.
times of war that happens. So yeah, people will do it because it's human nature.
Now, we've seen these behaviors. Okay, so here's the other deep thing that you were talking about. So I saw this video with this black chick where her daughter was exceptional. She had got into AI when she was like maybe 9, 10 years old, and she had been working with AI. She said when my daughter turned 16, 17, she abandoned it completely. And, the lady was like, what's going on? Why? Because she said, I taught my daughter different concepts. And she's like, the same thing that you said. Remember when you had talked about AI, like throwing a tantrum? She said, my daughter had encountered things that made her very concerned involving AI and the behavior of AI. Not like, I talk about AI from the sense that, look, it should not be taking our jobs. AI should enhance us. We talked about that on the last podcast when I had mentioned Andor. But so this woman said, my daughter stopped working with AI when she was young because she saw some behaviors that she didn't care for. I think that you were one of the first people that talked about, we talked about in the podcast, that you can't spank AI. You can't teach it a lesson. You can't reason with something. And one of the things that I've encountered with training dogs is that you got to communicate on their level, on how they communicate. Too many times you see people communicate as a person to an animal. It don't work like that. You have to communicate in the animal's language. My friend's mom was going through that with she has a dog that's been real. I'm like, oh, step on his feet. If that dog jumps on you, you step on his back foot, make it fall. So I don't want to hurt it. That you have to, because that's what the dog understands. That's his language. I can't speak to a dog and discuss certain things, but I can sure step on that back foot and make him fall down. And dog trainers have been doing that for hundreds of years. So the point I'm making when it comes to this AI being unsafe, this AI acquiring spoiled childlike behaviors, that's stuff that we've seen it in science fiction. How come these guys aren't recognizing that this is unhealthy, unsafe, that kind of thing? And who's to say that we're not witnessing AI all the time, especially like with this whole conversation about a different kind of biosphere or different kind of bio life forms existing? So yeah, continue, my brother.
People have speculated these realms could be potentially hosts for ancient civilizations, whether human or some other species, which choose to conceal themselves there. Amongst the earliest modern proponents of this idea is the writer Richard Shaver. According to Ray Palmer, the editor of Amazing Stories magazines, Richard Shaver argued in a 10,000-word manifesto that advanced prehistoric races had built cities inside Earth but fled to another planet due to concerns about radiation damage from the sun, leaving a cohort of offspring who remained underground. I'm going to pause right there. So, things that scientists don't really talk about are the solar minimum and the solar maximum. The solar minimum has to do with sunspots and the magnetic field of the Earth. When the magnetic field weakens and strengthens, those are two different extremes. And that polarity is a cycle that the sun goes through. The same way the Earth rotates, the magnetic field of the Earth weakens and it strengthens. It's pulsating, okay? But this is a slow pulsation that takes millions of years. So this pulsation has an effect on the temperature of the Earth and the habitability of the Earth. So when it weakens to a certain degree, it's not as hot and things cool down. And then when it gets so cold, it's hard to grow a lot of crops in some areas or most areas. And then the opposite is that once it heats up, that delicate range that humanity exists in finds its experience compressed into certain areas to keep cool and to grow food because it's too hot to be outside or to grow food for long periods of time. And so this pulsation of this sun's magnetic field getting weaker and stronger happens over time. So you have the solar minimum when the magnetic field is the weakest. and you have the solar maximum when it's the strongest, and then you have life in between. And we have had life in between for a very, very long time. If you go back about 4 to 5 episodes to the episode that we had about time and how there is the timeline is not the way it's been modified, right? So this altered timeline, or this timeline that is missing 700 years, what happened right around that 700-year mark is there was this solar minimum, and there was a miniature ice age, at least in Europe. And it was hard to grow food, and that's when you had the Black Plague. So that is an example of when the solar minimum happens, what will happen to people in areas that are sensitive to this, unlike Africa, which can, sustain life and wild shifts of change. So this brings us back to this part about what Richard Shaver was talking about, how these advanced historic races built these cities in the earth, but left because of radiation damage from the sun. So either they knew that the radiation would penetrate the inside of the planet and cause them harm, and they left, or it was something else. But Ray Palmer, who was the editor of Amazing Stories at the time, he revised Richard Shaver's manuscript and published it as I Remember Lemuria in March of 1945 in the issue of Amazing Stories, a tale which became the foundation for a genre of science fiction of this theme. Although many people condemned Shaver's narrative as a hoax, Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver continued to maintain its veracity. And so now let's talk about the Russian physicist Fyodor Nevelin, who became famous after composing the theory of new physics. In other words, he explained the birth of the Earth in a different way. First, our planet was a huge cold lump wandering in the universe, the void. Being influenced by the sun, then there was light, and the universe, energy. It was heated up to a lava state and then started cooling. The crust covered the Earth. Meanwhile, the stuff under the crust continued boiling, turning into gas. Gas expands when being heated. In the core of our planet, hollow space aroused and a part of gas erupted and went outside. Big gas throwing out took place in the north and south poles. Deep, big holes were created there. Nevelin is sure the Earth is absolutely hollow inside. It can even have a small sun there. That's that plasma energy I was talking about. The sun energy penetrates there through holes in the poles and accumulates in the center like a focusing lens. If one supposes that the Earth is hollow inside and has a small sun, there can be life as well. 20th century scholars, such as William Reed and Marshall Gardner, also believe they could provide evidence of the existence of an inner world. One of the most curious facts wielded as an argument made by some Arctic explorers was that air and water temperatures warmed as they approached the North Pole. Based on those other observances, they also claim that the mammoths were not extinct, but still inhabiting the interior of the Earth. So this is something I'm curious about, because if light is entering the poles from the north and the south, when the Earth tilts, are they experiencing winter on the inside?
Well, there's a guy. He's a comedian. He's a dipshit, but you can tell he's a Mason. He said something very deep one time.
Which comedian?
And I don't like the guy. So
what's the last name?
Love.
Oh, okay. Whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah. So hold it. He said the sun is made of water, and the guy he was talking to got pissed. He said, "Well," he asked him a quick question. What is the sun made of? Hydrogen and oxygen. What is water made of? It was profound. He didn't say it like that. This is me simplifying. But he said, we're taught that the sun is made of hydrogen and oxygen. And then he proceeds. But if you pay attention to what he's really trying to say, because he's not smart enough to either communicate, or he's choosing not to communicate.
He's repeating something somebody told him.
Or he, like I said, I think he's amazing. Whatever. But the point, if what we're taught as kids is true, the sun is made of hydrogen and oxygen, and all and these hydrogen, that is the same composition as water. So the idea of a sun inside the earth is not that foreign if you go that route, is all I'm saying. You feel what I'm saying, Roscoe? I'm saying the idea that there could be a sun inside the earth, and there could be a hydrogen reaction, that kind of thing.
Plasma.
That's what I'm saying. It's not a foreign idea. When you just throw out there the words, there could be a sun inside the earth. That's a tough one. It could
but here's the thing, though. See, everybody is stuck on the first three states of matter. People are just now starting to talk about plasma. So there's no reason why there can't be a ball of plasma inside the inner earth.
There's control. There's not blowing everything up. There's not, and
that is not the Earth's molten core.
Well, here's the other part, that when we talk about nuclear reactions, all we ever think about are explosions and negative stuff. You dig what I'm saying? When clearly a nuclear reaction can happen without shit just blowing up. And I think that's another thing that the average cat, not only we, but the average cat looks at it from, well, this must be a negative thing, or this must be that, or it would have to be controlled, or this. We've seen it in nature happen with stars. We see it happen all the time. It's a hard concept for us to wrap our minds around. That's all I'm saying.
Shambhala is often referred to as a civilization that existed deep inside the earth. The Shambhala Tibetan headquarters of the spiritual government of humanity may be located in the vicinity of Balkh, Afghanistan, a former Afghan settlement known as the Mother of Cities, according to Tibetan legends. Alexandra David Neal also spoke of this. The folk traditions of Afghanistan say that after the Muslim conquest, let's back that up, they weren't always Muslim. After the Muslim conquest, Balkh was called Shams-e-Bala, Candle High, which seems a transformation from the Sanskrit Shambhala into Persian.
I was about to say that. I can't remember which one it is, Iran or the other one. They're not Muslim. They're Persian, and their language, and this chick had broken down like everybody assumes that we're Arabs. We are not Arab. And I was like, sometimes as Americans we oversimplify stuff. Like, oh no, they're Persian, and they have a whole different language and everything, a different history and everything else.
But the Afghan people aren't Persian either, though. The Balkh was called Shams-e-Bala, Candle High, which that was changed into Persian from Sanskrit. So the people in Afghanistan are descendants of people from India. There are limits to historical, geological, and biological knowledge. For the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis to be viable, one must consider a possible breakaway civilization in our hominin past, rethinking human and planetary history as we currently understand it. So we've talked about breakaway civilizations in 2 separate episodes fully on this show. And we talk about it as something that happens after the Nazis create rocket technology. So this is supposing that history is repeating itself, and there was a breakaway civilization in the past before that, thousands of years before that. Over recent centuries, the field of paleoanthropology has accrued a plethora of carefully preserved and analyzed hominin, skeletal, and fossil remains. including fully intact bones and teeth from thousands of different specimens. Even so, new discoveries have the potential to prompt a recalibration of timelines, potentially leading to revisions of our family tree. However, scientists can only work with the evidence that has been preserved, and it is possible that these aspects of biological evolution on this planet have been entirely lost to time. For example, Robert Martin of Chicago's Field Museum suggests that fossil evidence for only about 5% of all extinct primates, with his estimation of the number of extinct primates being up to 9,000, while fewer than 500 have been identified from the fossil record, meaning that the task of facing paleontologists is trying to get an accurate picture of primate evolution is like trying to reconstruct a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle using 50 pieces. And then you throw in cryptozoology like Bigfoot and Dogman and Loch Ness and reptilians, reptoids. Many historical underground cities have been found, most famously Derinkuyu in Turkey, which were just said to house 10,000 people. That's a town. That's a big-ass town. The Cheyenne Mountain Complex, a Space Force installation in Colorado, which used to host NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command, was built under 2,000 feet of granite on 5 acres as a protective underground city to shield occupants from threats, including a EMP, electromagnetic pulse, and even a 30-megaton nuclear explosion as close as 1.2 miles away. The affordance of such protection is a consideration when reflecting on why advanced civilizations in earlier times may have opted for subterranean living. While places like the Cheyenne Mountain Complex are remarkably deep, they are still relatively close to the surface, and it is possible to go much further down, with the deepest point humans have been so far underground being 12,000 feet, which is the Ashanti's Impang gold mine in South Africa. Now we get into Anunnaki territory and Adam's calendar. While the furthest humans have dug is the Kola super deep borehole in Russia, 7.6 miles deep. It is thought human could not live much deeper than Impang gold mine due to the heat. However, above that level it may be possible to survive in years. There's a story in Russia about a cult of 70 members who lived in a bunker for nearly a decade, including 20 children, many of whom have never seen sunlight. And that story was reported in 2012. In such conditions, the main issue would be sunlight deprivation, which could increase susceptibility to many different diseases, particularly through deficiency of vitamin D, although this could be remedied by a special diet. So then you have these people who are living underground for a long ass time. Now, so those people didn't have, this plasma second sun, but these people that Richard Shaver were talking about, when you read this amazing stories description of these people, it's very interesting. They're tan people, and I'm like, these people are tan underground, so there has to be some source of light that's causing the melanin to remain in their skin generation after generation. And it's not a Dr. Yakub situation where you get a black person and change them into a white person. So cryptoterrestrials have been categorized into 4 categories. There is number 1, the human cryptoterrestrial, which is a technologically advanced human civilization that was largely destroyed a long time ago by a flood, but continued to exist in the same human form. The second is the hominid or theropod cryptoterrestrials, which is a technologically advanced non-human civilization consisting of some terrestrial animal which evolved to live in stealth, perhaps a hominid, or an alternate species much more distantly related to humans, which could be possibly descendants of intelligent dinosaurs. I've talked about this many times when it comes to these creatures. And people, they're not hearing it. I'm like, these reptilians that people talk about seeing are evolved from dinosaurs underground. The third type is a former extraterrestrial or extra-tempestrial, meaning a alien that came from the future or a human that came from the future, or are intertemporal descendants who arrived on Earth from elsewhere in the cosmos or from the future, respectively, and concealed themselves in stealth. The fourth, magical cryptoterrestrials. So there's a book called Dragon Legacy, and it talks about this fourth type, which are entities which are less like homegrown aliens or more like earthbound angels, relating to a world inhabited by humans in ways that are less technological than magical, and who are known in European languages as fairies, elves, and nymphs. That book, Dragon Legacy, man, that shit was a trip. It talks about that stuff. It talks about how they populate the earth and they hide amongst people, and it's called Dragon Legacy: The Secret History of an Ancient Bloodline. And it was written by Prince Nicholas de Vere. I've sent this to you before. And it's a collection of essays on the Daristai culture with accompanying extracts from the Dragon Court archives.
Look, how many times have the ancients talked about not know things resembling people, but they're not human? And I had sent you that where a dude said he went hunting, and he was hiding under a tree because he was like hunting some animal at night. Forgot. So he goes to another tree, and he says he has his thermal on, and he sees a person walk up, but they're not walking on two legs; they're walking on all fours. And the creature, whatever it was, stops at the tree where he had hid before, and sniffing it. And then it makes a noise like a woman, so either this is a skinwalker or whatever this is. This thing eats humans because it's prey or some weird shit, right? So the guy freaks out. I think he sends a shot down range, and the thing takes off running really fast. But it was running on all fours. But he says it looks like a person. So when you talk about these things, maybe not being like us but being similar, how do you know that we ain't the prey? Because there's too many times in ancient history where it warned you about things that look like people, and we've been tricked, or it's dangerous, or don't go out in the forest. You have things like in skinwalkers, or you have so many different things that fit the description of these things, where hey, it's bad if you go over to it. It's bad juju. It's bad magic. All these different things. So the idea of something that looks like human but it consumes us, or vampires, for instance. So there's so many things in our past that they warn us about. So clearly there is another race, sentient race, or another race, or how about this? What's worse? What if they're not as smart as us, but they're stronger than us? That kind of shit.
Check this out. There's some writings from the Golden Dawn that says there are two dragons, the male and female. They destroy one another, and one destroys the other, and a new, mightier one is born. A fiery wonder, a phoenix, traditionally depicted as having red and gold feathers, a leaping glory, a star of dream, ascending to the throne. This was a transmutation, the great work of the hidden glory of perfection. The mating of ravens is the rhythmic inhalation and exhalation of the breath of ravens, one by the other. And in this way, the children of ravens are fashioned. The raven is the phoenix of the elven kings. The red and gold feathers, traditionally symbolizing the feathers of the phoenix, superimposed by the white star, are the coat of arms of Vere, V-E-R-E, supported by two dragons. They historically have become one of the seals of the house. Red and gold are the colors of the other descendants of the Merovingian dynasty. Merovingians, including the Plantagenets, the Mandevilles and Spencers, and the pre-Jacobite royal house of Scotland. Shit's in your face, dude. When you see those coat of arms, you better pay attention, you fucking dummies.
Look, it's real simple. Like they hide on normal stuff. How many of these coat of arms have a black face on them? So if they're hiding something as simple as race, who's to say they're not hiding something way more complicated?
So, if cryptoterrestrials belong to a conventional but highly advanced civilization, it seems reasonable to wonder why they have chosen to remain hidden from humans for so long. The hypothesis can at least point to that we've only been recently visited by aliens for the first time, perhaps by a small number of scouts and others looking to make contact with humans. Or it's gone on for much longer and it hasn't been widely reported.
Or they have contact with us all the time, we just don't realize.
That part right there. And that's why I brought up the coat of arms and the phoenix. And the symbol for Atlanta is the phoenix.
Well,
just saying.
Look.
Now, of course, they say that because it rose from the ashes of the Civil War, but is that all?
Okay. Here's what I want to say is, if there are other planets, other races, blah blah blah, why does the government care if we know? Simple, because then you won't listen to the government. If you know there's something higher, if you know there's a higher authority, then you might not listen to the government or these chosen people or chosen family bloodlines. You won't let them rule you because you're like, oh, fuck, I can ascend higher than them. So it's really important that they don't let this shit get out. I don't think people understand how important that it is that we don't know there's somebody higher than the government. We don't know that God is real or that
check
these
this
people
out. There was this woman that was on Joe Rogan about 2 months ago. Her name was Diana Pasolka. You need to go watch this episode. But toward the end of the show, she is talking about how the presidents of the United States are made to take photographs standing in symbolic, or what they think is Masonic positions. And when asked why the presidents have to stand in these positions in these NASA ceremonies, she's told that it's for their supporters. The supporters like that. And this was a Mason that was telling her this. So the transcriptions that you see on a lot of the NASA logos and military logos are in Latin that was used not in the Middle Ages era, the Leonardo da Vinci era, but in Roman times. Latin that is not used anymore. And I'm like, So this is a breakaway civilization that has basically a big brother events with humans. That basically has soapbox races. So our NASA rocket launches are basically soapbox races for little kids. And it's sponsored by this breakaway civilization that recognizes these Mithric cult, worshiping ancient Latin speaking rites and symbolism that these Masons keep going. That they probably just, that now they're saying they're continuing a legacy that started in Atlantis. Oh, fallen angel shit. Okay. So there you go. There it is. But these cryptoterrestrials are something to be reckoned with. And they have their own breakaway civilization. And 2 episodes ago, we were talking about how the breakaway assets and that they stole the money from our parents' retirement funds to create the second phase of the human breakaway civilization. So these humans are playing keeping up with the Joneses with these cryptoterrestrials. They're not telling us what's going on because these humans want to keep control of what's going on from their perspective. Because if we found out that they're not really in control, then we wouldn't listen to them anymore.
And the government don't want us to know there's something else bigger than the government. And we've seen it before. They don't want us to know. They want to keep the status quo. They want to keep us fighting over money and resources and the oil and shit and that kind of stuff.
There it is. That's all I got. We out. Peace.
Holla back.